Hey guys, tonight we slip back in time into the warm, dusty heart of Molly's golden age, a few hundred years ago, where the scent of wood smoke clings to your clothes, gold dust clings to every palm, and the hum of life in Timbuktu is as steady as the river nearby. You stir from sleep on your reed mat, eyes still heavy, but you know the day ahead will glimmer with molten light. The faint sound of donkey hooves on packed earth streets and someone humming an old song drifts through your mud brick walls. Outside, the sky glows peach and copper, a quiet promise of another scorching, treasure-filled day. You stretch, bones creaking like old wood, and you already feel the weight of the hammer in your hand, though you haven't even reached the forge yet. You probably wouldn't last long here, if we're honest. Between the relentless sun, the fine gold dust floating in the air, just waiting to lodge itself in your lungs, and the fact that you might burn your fingers before breakfast, this life isn't for the faint-hearted. But you've got this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know in the comments where you're listening from tonight and what time it is for you as we start this journey. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You sit up, pulling on a light tunic, still smelling faintly of yesterday's forge smoke. The city outside stirs lazily. Somewhere, a camel bell jingles. A cart creaks past, its wheels wearing deeper ruts into the sun-baked road. You step outside, bare feet touching the cool earth, and the first rays of sun catch on the clay walls, painting everything a sleepy gold. The air is still cool enough to feel refreshing, though you know it won't stay that way for long. In the distance, a call rises, low and melodic, the muezzin greeting the dawn. It reminds you that this city, this great hub of trade and scholarship, never really sleeps. Merchants from far-off lands arrived late last night, their caravans loaded with salt slabs taller than a man, ivory tusks gleaming pale in the moonlight, and of course, the flecks of gold that bring you your living. The smell of dust and leather lingers in the streets from their passing, but now a new day calls. You rub your hands together, thinking of the tasks ahead. The workshop awaits, a tiny inferno waiting to roar to life under your bellows. But for now, you soak in the morning calm. A donkey brays somewhere behind a wall. A woman sweeps her doorstep with a bundle of twigs, dust rising in lazy spirals that catch the sunlight like smoke. The world feels soft-edged, half asleep, and yet full of promise. Historians still argue whether Timbuktu at its peak really had 3 times more gold flowing through it than any other city in Africa. But the truth is simple when you stand here now. Every other person you meet has some connection to the precious metal. You can taste wealth in the air, like fine grit on your tongue. And you know before this day ends, your fingers will be glowing with it. You sling a small leather satchel over your shoulder, the same one you've had for years. It smells of oil and heat, the faithful companion to countless days of melting, shaping, bargaining, and occasionally cursing at stubborn lumps of metal that refuse to behave. There's a gentle sarcasm in your thoughts. People imagine goldsmithing is just hammering pretty trinkets, but they never think of the sweat dripping down your nose as you work beside fire hot enough to bake a loaf of bread in seconds. You step through the low doorway of your home, blinking against the growing light. The street is a patchwork of shadow and sun, uneven mud bricks casting long fingers of darkness across the ground. Two children race past, laughing, wooden toys clattering behind them. You nod to your neighbor, already leading his goats out for grazing. He nods back, yawning, eyes half closed, looking like he lost a fight with sleep itself. It's a simple beginning to what you already know will be a long, complex day. You inhale deeply, filling your lungs with the mixed scent of earth, ash, and the faint tang of metal wafting from a distant smithy. Today, like every day, gold will pass through your hands. Today, like every day, you'll try to coax beauty out of dust and fire, knowing full well that even the smallest mistake could turn a fortune into a useless lump. But for now, just for a moment, you let yourself stand there in the street, feeling the warmth on your skin, listening to the waking city, grateful for the quiet before the storm of the forge. The muezzin's call lingers in the still morning air as you rub the last traces of sleep from your eyes. The city stirs like a great beast waking slowly, its breath warm and tinged with dust. You pull your light scarf over your head, partly for the morning chill, partly for the sun that will soon glare down without mercy. The streets of Timbuktu are narrow, winding, and already alive with soft footsteps and muted greetings. Women in brightly dyed cloths balance clay jars on their heads with practiced ease, heading for the wells before the rush begins. The smell of damp earth and wet rope mixes with the faint spice of last night's cooking fires, still smoldering under clay pots. You shuffle toward the well yourself, feet leaving faint marks in the dust. There's no real hurry, but you know if you wait too long, you'll be queuing behind half the city, and water waits for no one. A rooster crows nearby, more indignant than triumphant, and you can't help but smirk. If roosters had bills to pay, you think, maybe they'd crow a little less self-importantly. The well sits in a small square, shaded on one side by a sprawling tree whose leaves whisper against each other in the morning breeze. A handful of people gather, chatting softly, voices weaving in and out like the hum of bees. You greet them with a nod, offering a quiet salam, your voice still husky with sleep. One man tells you the latest caravan news. Gold dust trickled in from Bambuk yesterday, finer than silk, but everyone's wondering if the next batch will fetch a fair price. You know better than to guess. Gold has a mind of its own when it comes to markets. You take your turn, lowering the leather bucket into the darkness of the well, hearing the echo of water far below. The rope scratches against your palms, rough from years of wear, and when you haul it up, cool droplets spray your legs. You pause, savoring that coolness. Timbuktu can be brutal later in the day, sun beating on every surface, streets shimmering like a mirage, but mornings like this feel like a gift. Historians still argue whether these early water gatherings were strictly routine or doubled as informal marketplaces, where traders struck quick dawn deals before the markets officially opened. Looking around now, you see it's a bit of both. Someone slips a small bundle of salt to a cloth merchant. Another exchanges a few cowrie shells for spices. Even before the sun has properly risen, gold, salt, and life itself are already on the move. Water jug in hand, you make your way back through the winding alleys, passing mud brick houses decorated with carved wooden doors. Some are chipped and worn, but they tell stories. Hands have opened and closed them for generations, letting in gossip, letting out laughter. You glance up to see birds circling above the rooftops, their calls sharp and quick, cutting through the heavy morning calm. You pause briefly at a small shrine built into a wall, a place where travelers and townsfolk alike leave little offerings, flowers, a carved bead, a whispered prayer. Your fingers hover for a moment over the carved stone. Being a goldsmith in a city like this, where wealth runs like an undercurrent beneath every conversation, you're acutely aware of fortune's fickle nature. One day, your work sits proudly on a ruler's arm. The next, it melts down into dust again for another purpose. You whisper a small private hope for steady hands and no mistakes today, then move on, a little lighter in spirit. The streets gradually swell with life now, traders shouting mild greetings, a group of scholars in flowing robes making their way toward Sankor Mosque for morning study, and somewhere, someone begins to play a low, rhythmic tune on a wooden flute. It drifts through the air like smoke, soft and winding, making you slow your steps just to listen. There's a peculiar peace in these early hours, a space where the city holds its breath before the sun climbs higher and the relentless business of gold and trade truly begins. You make your way home again, water sloshing gently in the jug. The smell of warm millet bread baking on a neighbor's hearth curls past you, and your stomach growls in protest. Soon you'll share a bowl of grain porridge, maybe a smear of honey if luck is kind. But first things first. You duck back into your home, set down the jug, and glance at the small tools lined neatly on the low shelf. They wait, patient, knowing that by midday they'll be singing against gold once more. You let your hand rest on the wooden handle of your hammer for just a second, as if greeting an old friend. Another day, another dance with fire and fortune lies ahead. But for now, it's just you, the cool quiet of morning, and the streets slowly waking around you. You take a moment to breathe in the calm stillness of your home, the scent of cool water, and faint traces of yesterday's forge lingering like a memory in the air. But calm never lasts long when there's gold to be shaped and hands waiting to pay for beauty. After a quick breakfast of porridge that sticks pleasantly to your ribs, and a sip of sweetened tea that wakes you more than the morning sun, you start gathering what you'll need for the walk to the workshop. Your satchel feels heavier today, not from weight, but from expectation. The traders who arrived last night from Bambuk brought new gold dust, fine as flour, and you've already promised a merchant you'll turn some of it into small, coin-like nuggets to use in the bustling markets. You slip a few well-worn tools inside, a small hammer with a handle polished smooth from years of sweat, tongs that pinch just right without slipping, and your little leather pouch of charcoal for the morning's first flames. You check the pouch 3 times because nothing ruins a day faster than running out of fuel halfway through a pour. Stepping out into the street again, the city feels different now. The drowsy calm of dawn has been replaced by a steady hum, like bees in a hive. Caravans jostle for space, camels grumbling under the weight of their loads. Traders from across the Sahara call out in accents thick with distant lands, offering salt slabs, dried fish, rare spices, and of course, flecks of gold glinting like sunlight caught in a jar. You're never bored in this city. Every street corner smells like a new adventure, or at least a new bargain to haggle over. You duck and weave through the growing crowd, careful not to catch your tunic on a merchant's overflowing basket of dyed cloths. The colors are so bright they make your eyes water, scarlets and indigos so deep they feel alive. A few stalls down, someone roasts nuts over a small brazier, the aroma making your stomach second-guess whether that bowl of porridge was enough. A child tugs at your sleeve, offering a trinket carved from bone, but you just smile and shake your head gently. Coins have to be saved for charcoal and fire today, not impulse buys. Historians still argue whether Timbuktu's marketplace in the 14th century was truly the busiest in West Africa or simply had the reputation for it. But here and now, pressed shoulder to shoulder with traders and travelers, it feels like the beating heart of the world. Gold isn't just a currency here. It's a language everyone understands, even if no one quite speaks it the same way. As you make your way toward the workshop, you pass the scholar's quarter, where men in long, pale robes sit cross-legged outside mud-brick libraries, copying manuscripts under the weak shade of cloth canopies. You catch snippets of talk about astronomy, poetry, and trade routes stretching farther than you can imagine. It's funny, you think. Some folks spend their lives moving gold, others moving ideas, and neither can do without the other. You make a mental note to ask one of the scribes later about the rumor you heard yesterday, that a new map arrived from Cairo showing a river none of you have ever seen before. The world feels wide and mysterious, even here in the dust and sun of home. Finally, the familiar low structure of your workshop comes into view, its roof patched with woven reeds to let the smoke out. The wooden door leans slightly to one side, a reminder that you keep meaning to fix the hinge but never quite do. You can hear faint clinking inside already. Your apprentice must have arrived early, sweeping out yesterday's ash and setting tools in place. You push the door open, greeted by the warm scent of soot and the promise of fire waiting to roar. The workshop is simple, functional, nothing grand, but every surface tells a story. The rough clay furnace squats in one corner, blackened by years of flame, next to a low bench scattered with molds, chisels, and scraps of gold in every stage of transformation. A small window lets in a narrow beam of light, illuminating motes of dust, dancing in the air like tiny sparks. You drop your satchel with a satisfying thump, roll up your sleeves, and stretch your fingers. This is where the day truly begins, where the real magic happens. Not the kind sung about by poets, but the kind that takes skill, sweat, and a bit of luck to keep from burning your eyebrows off. You glance at your apprentice, a gangly boy barely in his teens, already smudged with ash. He gives you a shy grin and hands you a small nugget from yesterday's work, now cool and solid. You inspect it with a practiced eye, nodding approvingly before setting it aside. The fire is low, waiting, the bellows quiet for now. Soon it will roar to life, but you allow yourself just one more breath of the calm before you light the flame, knowing once it begins, the forge won't rest until long after sunset. You crouch beside the clay furnace, running your fingers over its rough surface, feeling where yesterday's heat still lingers faintly like a ghost of fire past. The morning sun slants through the small window now, landing on your tools as if even the light knows it has a job to do here. You nod at your apprentice, who hands you the charcoal pouch, his eyes wide and eager to start the day. He knows this is the moment everything shifts. The quiet hum of the city outside fades, replaced by the heartbeat of the forge. You pour charcoal into the furnace, the tiny black lumps clattering softly against its walls. Your apprentice works the bellows, each push and pull sending little gusts of air that stir the ash, making it dance like restless spirits. You lean in, spark flint against steel, and a small flame flickers to life, licking at the charcoal before growing bolder with every breath of air. Soon, the furnace glows, heat radiating like the sun concentrated in one small pit. The smell of smoke and warm earth fills the workshop, settling in your lungs like an old friend. Today's gold dust sits in a small leather pouch on the bench, tied tightly to keep it safe. You untie it carefully, almost ceremonially, letting the fine grains slide into a clay crucible. They catch the light, tiny suns cascading into darkness, each grain a promise of wealth, beauty, and maybe trouble if handled poorly. Gold doesn't forgive mistakes. It bends reluctantly and melts only when coaxed just right. You've seen overconfident smiths ruin a batch and watch their profit evaporate like morning dew. Historians still argue whether 14th century Mali goldsmiths used more rudimentary open-pit furnaces or had mastered small controlled forges like yours. Judging by your daily experience, control is everything. A fire too hot scorches the gold, making it brittle. Too cold, and it refuses to flow, clumping like porridge left to cool too long. You aim for the sweet spot, a living flame, breathing just enough to transform dust into liquid glory. As the crucible warms, you stir the grains gently with a thin iron rod, whispering to yourself, a habit you picked up years ago. Maybe it's superstition, maybe it's focus, but you like to think the gold listens. The surface slowly changes, dull yellow grains fusing into a glowing molten pool that swirls like honey caught in sunlight. Your apprentice stares, awed, every time. You remember being that young, thinking gold was magic. Now you know the truth. It's part science, part muscle memory, and a dash of luck you pray for daily. You prepare the mold next, a small clay piece carved with the shape requested by the merchant, round nuggets, easy to stack and weigh. You sprinkle a bit of ash to keep the molten gold from sticking, just as your mentor once taught you, with a wink and a warning not to breathe too close when pouring. You still remember the smell of singed eyebrows from the one time you ignored that advice. A light chuckle escapes you, and your apprentice tilts his head, puzzled. One day, you tell him softly, you'll have your own story about learning the hard way. Finally, the gold is ready. You grip the crucible with long-handled tongs, arms steady despite the heat washing over you in waves. Slowly, carefully, you tilt it, letting the molten metal flow into the mold in a thin, shining stream. It hisses faintly as it meets the cool clay, a sound both soothing and a little terrifying. The workshop feels like it's holding its breath with you until the last drop settles and you set the crucible down, muscles relaxing only after it's safe. You leave the mold to cool, not rushing it. Impatience ruins more work than bad luck ever could. Instead, you sit back on the low stool, wiping sweat from your brow, and let your gaze wander to the tools on the bench. Each one has its own personality, the hammer that sings best on soft gold, the chisel with a tiny chip you keep meaning to fix, the files worn from years of shaping dreams for merchants and kings alike. This is your domain, small and humble, yet it touches faraway palaces when your work ends up in caravans heading north or east. Through the window, you can just hear the distant call of traders hawking their wares in the market, the city fully awake now. Somewhere a camel bell jingles, a reminder that wealth here doesn't sleep, not even for a moment. You glance at the glowing mold, knowing today's work is only beginning. More dust waits, more shapes to cast, More coins to please men who'll never set foot in your smoky workshop, but will weigh your handiwork with sharp eyes and sharper tongues. You flex your fingers, muscles warm and loose now from the first pour. Fire crackles beside you, alive, eager. You think to yourself with a hint of amusement that goldsmithing is less about gold and more about patience and sweat. Plenty of that. As the mold cools, you know it's time to prepare for the next batch, the rhythm of the forge steady as a heartbeat you've known all your life. The first pour has settled, a thin line of steam curling from the edges of the clay mold as it cools, leaving behind a promise of solid gold. You set it gently on a slab of stone and stretch your arms, rolling your shoulders until the morning stiffness gives way to the familiar, easy rhythm of the forge. This is where the real day begins, not just shaping gold, but shaping patience itself, because the craft is a long game. You glance at your apprentice, his face half smudged with ash already, eyes glued to the mold like it might open up and tell him secrets. You give him a playful nudge. Don't stare too hard, you tease. You'll scare it into turning silver. Once the nugget has cooled enough, you pop it from the mold, its surface still warm under your fingertips. It looks plain now, dull yellow and roughed around the edges, but you know what it can become with a bit of love and persuasion from your tools. You place it on the bench and pick up a small hammer, its handle perfectly fitted to your hand after years of work. Every strike must be gentle yet firm, coaxing the gold into shape rather than bullying it. Gold is soft, forgiving at times, but testy if you rush. You joke with your apprentice. Gold has a memory longer than a griot story. It remembers every wrong hit you give it. The hammer sings against the metal, a soft tink, 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 almost musical, and for a moment it feels like the world outside doesn't exist. The heat from the furnace, the smell of smoke, the weight of the hammer, it all blurs into a quiet, hypnotic rhythm. Historians still argue whether Molly's goldsmiths of your era worked mostly on royal commissions, or if most of their output was for common trade. Either way, as your hammer rises and falls, you're keenly aware that this tiny lump of gold might one day sit in a king's treasury, or more likely, clink between merchants at a dusty market stall hundreds of miles away. You pause to let the metal rest, then set it aside and grab a thin chisel to carve faint markings on the nugget, a simple design requested by the merchant. It's nothing elaborate today, just a set of tiny grooves for easy stacking and weighing. But even simple work carries your touch, a signature in every line. Your mentor once said that goldsmiths don't just make objects, they leave whispers in metal that outlive their names. You think about that sometimes when you hold a finished piece. How many years will it survive? Will some stranger, centuries from now, wonder about the hands that shaped it? Your apprentice brings you another pouch of gold dust, careful not to spill a single grain. Dust is wealth here, and a single lost pinch could feed a family for days. You weigh it on a small balance scale, adding tiny amounts until it's just right for the next pour. The scale wobbles slightly on the uneven bench, and you mutter about fixing that too. You make a lot of promises to your workshop that you never quite keep, but isn't that life everywhere? You grin at the thought and mutter under your breath, "Tomorrow I'll fix it," knowing tomorrow's promises are a goldsmith's favorite currency. Before you fire up the furnace again, you take a moment to check your stock of charcoal. It's running low already, which means a trip to the supplier later. You sigh, not because it's hard work, but because haggling over charcoal prices is more exhausting than smelting a dozen nuggets. Still, no fire, no gold. That's the rule of the trade. You strike flint to steel again, feeding the fire until it roars to life. The furnace glows brighter, the heat pressing close like an old friend who hugs a little too tightly. This time, you let your apprentice stir the gold dust, guiding his hand with soft instructions. Gentle, you say, like stirring honey you don't want to spill. He nods, biting his lip in concentration, and for a second you see yourself in his awkward, careful movements. Everyone starts with fear of fire before they learn it can be an ally. As the gold melts, you lean back, letting the crackle of the fire and the soft hum of the bellows fill the room. This part of the day is slow, meditative even, like waiting for bread to rise. Goldsmithing is never about rushing. It's about knowing when to wait, when to strike, and when to simply watch the flames. And there's a peculiar peace in that, a rhythm that feels older than you, older than the city itself. You glance at the first nugget cooling on the bench, its dull glow now almost like captured sunlight. Soon it will be traded, weighed, passed along to someone who sees only its value, not the hands that coaxed it from dust. But for now, in this little workshop, filled with smoke, ash, and the quiet determination of two people, gold is less about wealth and more about craft. A soft, shining thread that ties you to every smith who came before and everyone who will come after. By mid-morning, the heat inside the workshop has turned heavy, wrapping itself around you like a damp blanket that refuses to let go. The furnace glows a fierce orange, and your tunic clings to your skin. You wipe your brow with the back of your hand, smearing ash across your cheek without noticing. The second nugget is cooling, another promise of trade and survival, while your apprentice fans the forge to keep it breathing, just enough for the next batch. This is when the real tedium begins, the part that no one sings about in stories of Mali's golden age. They speak of the riches flowing through Timbuktu, caravans glittering with gold dust, and kings so wealthy they bent economies across continents. But they never talk about how the dust gets there, how many hours it takes to tease it into something solid enough to weigh, trade, or turn into finery for nobles. You smirk at the thought. If the griots told the truth, no one would call this age golden. They'd call it sweaty, smoky, and a little too loud. Today's batch isn't just nuggets. A merchant passing through yesterday requested small, flat discs, easier to stack for counting during long journeys. You know the molds for discs are fussy. The clay has to be smoothed just right, no cracks, no grit inside, or the gold will cling and ruin the pour. You grind a bit of fine sand into the clay, mixing it with water until it feels like thick porridge under your fingers. Your apprentice wrinkles his nose at the mess, but you just chuckle. Good gold only comes to those who aren't afraid of dirty hands, you tell him, waggling your stained fingers for emphasis. Historians still argue whether goldsmiths in this era kept personal marks on their work, subtle symbols to identify the craftsman even on trade pieces. You've always liked the idea, but today's discs aren't yours to sign. They belong to trade, not legacy. Still, you allow yourself one tiny flourish, a perfectly smooth edge, better than what most merchants expect. Maybe, just maybe, someone down the line will notice and wonder who made it. Once the molds are ready, you pour the molten gold, the thin streams filling each depression like liquid sunlight. The sound is a soft hiss, a lullaby for those who know its language. Your apprentice watches every move, asking in a whisper why gold makes that sound when it meets the clay. You shrug with mock mystery, saying because gold likes to gossip when it finds a new home, earning a laugh that lightens the heavy air. With the new pieces cooling, you finally step outside for a moment, gulping fresh air as if you've been underwater too long. The street outside is alive now, merchants shouting, donkeys braying, drums beating somewhere far off. The smell of spices drifts past, tugging at your stomach in reminder that lunch isn't far away. You glance up at the pale blue sky and think of the far-off places this gold might travel to. Across desert sands on camelback, down the Niger River on carved canoes, maybe even to strange markets where no one knows your name but knows your metal. It's a thought both humbling and funny, your hands shaping coins that might outlive you, traveling farther than you ever will. Back inside, you pulled the cool discs from their molds one by one, stacking them neatly on a wooden tray. They're plain, unassuming, yet each carries weight beyond measure in a world where gold decides wars, builds cities, and makes or breaks empires. You test them on the scales, making sure no one can accuse you of cheating weight. Honesty in goldsmithing isn't just virtue, it's survival. A wrong weight can ruin a reputation faster than a spilled crucible. The apprentice begins cleaning tools, scraping off bits of hardened gold dust that clung stubbornly to the ladle. You tell him the story of a friend, another goldsmith, who once dropped an entire batch into the dirt and spent hours sifting it back out grain by grain. That's why you never rush, you say, your tone half warning, half jest. Gold doesn't forgive clumsy hands. The boy nods solemnly, though you see the twitch of a smile on his lips. The morning work leaves your body tired, but your mind oddly calm. Goldsmithing isn't just labor, it's rhythm, fire, pour, cool, hammer, shape. The motions carry you through the hours like a slow song. By the time you line up the finished pieces on the bench, their dull glow catching the last of the morning light through the window, you feel that rare satisfaction. Today's work hasn't cheated you of time or patience. It's not glorious, not legendary, but it's honest metal, shaped by hands that know their trade. You lean back on your stool, crack your knuckles, and glance at the apprentice, now humming softly as he wipes the bench clean. The sound blends with the faint crackle of the forge, the muffled noise of the street outside, and for a moment the world feels small, safe, and exactly as it should be. Just a smith, his apprentice, and gold slowly giving itself up to their will. The sun edges toward its highest point, glaring through the small slit of a window in your workshop and painting everything in a dusty gold light that feels oddly appropriate. You stretch your back, hearing a quiet pop that tells you you've been hunched too long over the bench. The forge's heat, mixed with the warm air outside, turns the room into something close to an oven, and you mutter to yourself that one day you'll build a bigger shop, one with space for air to breathe. But not today. Today you've got polishing to do. Polishing gold is a strange art. It's less about brute force and more about coaxing the shine out of stubborn metal. You grab a small piece of soft leather worn from years of use and sprinkle a fine ash paste on it. Some say the recipe for a perfect polish is a guarded secret among smiths, passed from master to apprentice like a precious heirloom. In truth, every smith has their own concoction. Some swear by river sand, others by ground limestone, a few by odd things like powdered eggshells. Historians still argue whether these secret recipes really made a difference, or if they were mostly tradition wrapped in mystery. You personally like to think it's half science, half superstition, and a good polish comes mostly from patience. You pick up one of the cooled discs and begin the slow circular strokes, watching the dull yellow surface soften and catch the light. Bit by bit, it turns from a lifeless lump into something that whispers wealth even before it leaves your hands. Your apprentice leans close, curious, and you joke, "This part is like sweet-talking gold. It only shines if you charm it right." He giggles, repeating the line under his breath like he might use it later to impress someone. As you work, you think about how this task feels almost meditative. Each pass of the cloth is a step closer to perfection, and yet you know no piece is ever truly perfect. Gold has its own will, tiny imperfections hidden like secrets under its surface. You've learned to love those flaws, to see them as proof that every piece has a story, just like the people who handle it. There's talk in the market of royal emissaries arriving soon from Niani, maybe even from the great city of Timbuktu. They'll be seeking gold for trade, for gifts, perhaps even for grand ceremonial objects. The rumors put a quiet pressure in your chest. If one of your pieces catches their eye, it could mean more commissions, more respect, maybe even an invitation to work closer to the royal court. But then again, history is full of craftsmen who dreamed of royal favor and found only empty promises. You remind yourself not to chase glitter when steady work keeps you fed. After polishing a handful of discs, you set them aside and check your tools. The hammer's handle is loose again, a crack creeping toward the iron head. You run your thumb over it, promising for the third time this week to fix it before it splinters completely. The chisel tips are dull, needing sharpening on the grindstone, and the ladle you use to pour gold has a stubborn patch of hardened metal stuck inside, mocking your attempts to scrape it clean. Tools are like donkeys, you mutter. They only work hard if you feed them care. Your apprentice looks confused at the comparison, and you laugh, adding, "Don't worry, I won't make you give them hay." Outside, you hear the clatter of hooves and the murmur of a caravan moving through town. The thought crosses your mind that perhaps some of these travelers carry salt from Tagaza or fine cloth from the north, ready to be traded for the very gold cooling in your shop. Molly's wealth is built on exchanges like this: gold for salt, gold for horses, gold for the strange goods arriving from places you've only heard of in travelers' tales. And here you are, one tiny cog in the great wheel of trade, shaping bits of earth into pieces of power. The afternoon light shifts as you finish the last disc, holding it up to admire the smooth surface. It's not jewelry, not art, but it's clean and precise, weight true to measure, polished enough to catch a glint even in the dim light. It's good work, maybe not a masterpiece, but the kind of honest craft that builds trust, coin by coin, trade by trade. You set the discs carefully in a cloth pouch, tying it with a practiced knot. There's still more work to come, the scales to recalibrate, molds to mend, the floor to sweep of gold dust too precious to waste. But for now, you let yourself enjoy this small moment of stillness. the faint metallic sheen on your fingertips, and the quiet satisfaction of having turned raw, stubborn dust into something the world will value. You glance at your apprentice, his hair a tangle of sweat and soot, and give him a nod. "Good work today," you say softly. He grins, a rare, proud grin that tells you maybe, just maybe, he's learning the real lesson. Goldsmithing isn't just about gold. It's about patience, persistence, and finding small joys in a trade that demands more from you than it ever gives back. Lunch in Molly's golden age isn't a lavish affair in a goldsmith's workshop, though the city might hum with markets full of spices, dates, and roasted meats. For you, it's simple. A bowl of millet porridge with a splash of sour milk. Maybe a dried fig if you're lucky, eaten on a low stool by the doorway where the faintest breeze sneaks in. The heat is relentless now, a heavy blanket pressing down on every roof, making even the thought of a roaring forge feel like madness. But you know that as soon as you swallow the last spoonful, the forge will call you back. Your apprentice finishes before you, licking the wooden spoon like a boy still dreaming of sweeter treats. You grin, remembering when you were that young and still believed wealth was a goldsmith's birthright, not something scraped and hammered from stubborn metal day after day. You know, you tell him between mouthfuls, historians still argue whether goldsmiths ever ate better than this. Some say the trade made men rich overnight. I say, if that were true, we'd be chewing lamb and honey every noon instead of this grain. He laughs, and the moment lightens, the hunger less sharp, because humor always makes a meal taste better. After lunch, you don't dive straight back to heavy work. This is the hour for quieter tasks, for keeping your tools and yourself alive long enough to see another day's labor. You fetch a small pot of oil and begin rubbing it into the handles of your hammer and chisels, keeping the wood from cracking in the dry air. Tools are extensions of your hands, after all. A lazy smith neglects them at his peril. You still remember the sting on your thigh the day a splintered hammer handle gave out mid-swing. Lesson learned. Mend your tools before they betray you. Your apprentice sharpens the chisels on a flat stone, his motions clumsy but eager. You guide his hands, showing him how to hold the angle, how to listen for the faint hiss that says the edge is keen enough. "There's no glory in dull tools," you say softly. "They make ugly work, and ugly work earns ugly pay." He nods, biting his lip in concentration, determined to master even this small ritual. You smile to yourself, knowing these are the rhythms that turn boys into craftsmen, not just pouring gold, but caring for every piece of the trade. Once the tools are set, you sweep the floor carefully, gathering even the tiniest specks of gold dust in a cloth. Some say it's greed, this obsession with every grain, but you know better. Gold doesn't forgive waste. A careless smith might throw away a day's food without even knowing it, so you treat every mote as treasure. Later, you'll heat it, melt it, add it to a new batch. Nothing leaves your workshop without purpose. The quiet hour also brings visitors sometimes, traders, neighbors, or wandering griots looking for a drink of water and a story to trade. Today, an elderly man passes by, leaning on a stick carved with symbols you don't recognize. He pauses at your doorway, eyes lingering on the small tray of polished discs drying near the window. "Fine work," he says, in a voice like dry leaves, and you nod respectfully, offering a seat and a sip from your water jar. He tells you tales of caravans returning from far-off lands, where gold is weighed against spices you've never smelled and stones that glow like trapped moonlight. You listen, half dreaming, half calculating whether your gold might one day join such journeys. There's debate among scholars now about how far Molly's gold truly reached. Some swear it glittered in European courts. Others say it vanished long before crossing the Sahara. Sitting here, wiping sweat from your brow, you think it's both. Some gold travels, some stays home, but all of it begins in workshops like this, with calloused hands and a forge that eats more wood than seems reasonable. When the visitor leaves, you and your apprentice patch small cracks in the molds, shaping clay with wet fingers, smoothing every edge so future pours won't fail. You hum softly, a tune your master once sang, something about gold-loving patient hearts. It's off-key, but it makes the boy grin, and that's enough to keep the fatigue at bay. By mid-afternoon, the tools gleam, the molds rest drying in the sun, and the forge waits like a sleeping beast, ready for another round. You take a moment to lean against the doorframe, feeling the rough wood under your palms, and look at the bustling street outside. Merchants haggle, children chase goats, women carry baskets balanced effortlessly on their heads. Life moves fast out there, but here in your workshop, everything slows to the steady rhythm of craft. Gold doesn't hurry, so neither can you. It's not glamorous, this pause between labors. It won't make it into the songs or the legends. But it's what keeps you alive in a trade that eats men faster than fire eats wood. And as you breathe in the dusty air and watch the sun crawl across the sky, you find a strange comfort in the quiet work of care and preparation, knowing the hammer and heat will call you soon enough. The late afternoon sun slants through the narrow window, casting long shadows across your bench. This is the part of the day where true focus takes over. The rough casting is behind you, the polishing nearly done, but now you step into the delicate, nerve-testing world of fine detail. Every master goldsmith knows this stage can make a piece sing or leave it forever flat and silent, no matter how much gold it holds. You sit on the low stool, tools spread before you like an artist's palette, a small owl for engraving, slender chisels for creating grooves, a thin file worn smooth from years of use. Gold isn't just money here, it's meaning. Kings might use it as currency, but when a piece leaves your workshop with carvings, symbols, or a personal mark, it carries a story too. Today, a merchant from the marketplace has asked for a set of small gold weights, each etched with patterns of flowing water. He says they'll remind him of the Niger River and bring luck to his trade. You smile, because you know luck has little to do with rivers or gold. Luck is mostly surviving each day with both hands unburned. But you also know that meaning is as valuable as metal. So you carve carefully. The gold resists your first few strokes, soft yet stubborn, like a cat deciding whether it even wants your attention. You lean in close, breathing slow, tracing a thin, swirling line. Every few moments you glance up, making sure the apprentice is watching, not because you crave admiration, but because someone must learn the art of steady hands, of not letting a cough or stray thought ruin a day's work. There's an old saying among smiths, one slip of the chisel and a king's patience turns to rage faster than a forge fire. Historians still argue whether that proverb was metaphorical or based on actual, regrettable incidents, but you preferred not to test it. Outside, the marketplace grows louder as people rush to finish trade before evening. Snatches of songs, bargaining calls, and the bray of a stubborn donkey drift into your workshop. The sounds are oddly soothing, a reminder that life continues beyond the gold dust clinging to your fingers. You pause for a sip of water, your mouth dry from concentration, and let yourself chuckle. Imagine, you murmur to your apprentice, if future scholars ever write about this moment, they'll think we goldsmiths were mystical artisans shaping wealth itself. In truth, it's mostly sweat, sore backs, and trying not to sneeze mid-engrave. By now, your eyes ache from squinting, but you push on, adding small notches around the edges, giving the design depth. The little discs begin to catch the waning sunlight, glimmering in a way that feels almost alive. You file rough edges down to a silky smoothness, testing each piece with the tip of your finger. The tiniest scratch can mean insult to a client's pride, or worse, a bad reputation in a city where every word of trade travels faster than the harmattan winds. There's another job waiting on the bench, a thin band of gold destined to become a pendant for a griot, the storyteller who wanders these streets singing the names of ancestors. He wants it carved with a sunburst to honor his mother's memory. This one feels different, less like a commission and more like carrying someone's soul in metal. You hesitate a moment, then let the chisel dance in gentle arcs, imagining her warmth captured forever in this tiny shape. There's a strange intimacy in crafting something meant to outlast you, something strangers might hold centuries from now and wonder about the hands that made it. As dusk creeps closer, you wipe your brow and stretch your stiff shoulders. The apprentice yawns loudly, drawing a mock glare from you. Don't let the gold hear you getting bored, you tease. It has a nasty habit of punishing impatience. He grins sheepishly, grabbing a cloth to wipe filings from the bench. It's a good sign. Every master knows a willing helper is worth their weight in, well, gold. By the time the sun sinks low, your delicate work is done. The discs gleam with river patterns, the pendant carries its quiet sunburst, and even the scraps you filed away are set aside to be melted another day. There's no applause, no fanfare, just a long exhale and the satisfaction of knowing that this small collection of objects might soon pass from hand to hand, from market stall to caravan, maybe even to lands you'll never see. Some say Molly's gold was legendary because of sheer abundance. You believe it's legendary because each piece carries a human story, hammered, carved, and whispered into shape by people like you. You rise slowly, stretching your stiff back, and murmur to yourself, tomorrow same story, different shapes. The thought makes you smile, because there's a quiet magic in doing the same thing 1,000 times and finding it just as meaningful each day. Evening creeps in on quiet feet, and with it comes a new rhythm in the workshop. The air cools a little as the sun sinks below the flat horizon, leaving streaks of orange and pink across the sky. You can almost feel the city exhaling after a day of trading, hammering, and shouting prices. For you, though, the workday isn't done. Not until every last tool is cleaned, every scrap of gold secured, and every ember in the forge tamed to sleep. The first task is safety. A forge left smoldering can mean disaster, not just for you, but for half the neighborhood. You've seen it before. A careless apprentice walks away, a gust of evening wind stirs the coals, and suddenly a whole row of workshops faces the wrath of unchained fire. So you take a long iron rod and stir the coals. making sure they're settling, letting the glow fade from angry orange to a docile red. The forge hisses like a snake reluctantly coiling in on itself, and you mutter under your breath as if soothing a stubborn mule. It's a silly habit, but you've done it for years, and so far the forge has never bitten you back. Historians still debate whether blacksmiths and goldsmiths in Mali developed early fireproofing techniques or if it was mostly sheer caution and luck. You suspect it was mostly the latter, and a good set of lungs for blowing out stray sparks. Your apprentice sweeps up the floor again, collecting the day's dust into a cloth pouch you keep tied inside your shirt. Every fleck of gold counts, and the thought of losing even a grain of sand keeps you more vigilant than any tax collector ever could. Remember this, you tell him, handing over the pouch for a moment. The future of our supper sometimes weighs less than a single grain of sand. He nods solemnly, probably dreaming of feasts and coins, not realizing yet that being a goldsmith rarely makes you rich. It makes you precise, patient, and a little obsessed with dust. Next come the tools. Each hammer gets wiped clean, each chisel set in its place, the owls lined up neatly as soldiers on a parade ground. You remember your old master's words, "Tools have long memories. Treat them well, and they won't betray you when it matters." Some modern historians like to romanticize this, imagining tools as sacred objects. You think it's simpler than that. A rusted chisel makes a ragged cut, and a ragged cut makes a client very unhappy. Outside, the street is alive with evening sounds. Merchants packing away their goods, griots singing lullabies to restless children, the smell of roasting fish drifting temptingly into your doorway. Your stomach growls, but there's one last ritual before you can close up shop. You take out the small, leather-bound ledger you keep under a stone by the bench. Every gram of gold you received this morning is weighed again. Every finished piece noted, every leftover flake counted. Numbers aren't glamorous, but in this trade, forgetting a single figure can ruin trust. And trust, once lost, is harder to mend than a shattered ingot. Some say Mali's gold economy ran on sheer abundance, that there was so much of it you could scoop it from riverbeds. You know better. The real economy runs on trust between miners, traders, smiths, and kings. Lose track of even a speck of gold, and you'll spend months rebuilding a reputation you barely earned in the first place. So you double-check, because sleep comes easier when the day balances out on paper. Finally, with the last entry made, you step outside and pull the wooden shutters across the workshop opening. The apprentice ties them closed with a strip of cloth, a flimsy lock, but enough in a city where thieves know gold is harder to steal than to buy. You take one last look at the forge, dark now, breathing only faint warmth, and nod to yourself. Another day survived. Another day without burns, theft, or broken molds. A small victory worth a private grin. As you and the apprentice walk home, the sky overhead turns to deep velvet, stars pricking through one by one. The city changes with nightfall. Torches flicker outside homes. The sounds soften to murmured conversations. The smells shift from dust and sweat to spices and smoke. You pass neighbors who nod in greeting, other craftsmen who know exactly how your muscles ache. A donkey brays somewhere far off, sounding more dramatic than the day's events truly warranted. You can't help but think of tomorrow, the orders waiting, the merchants returning, the heat of the forge. But for now, you let the rhythm of footsteps on packed earth lull your mind. Some say goldsmiths in Mali's golden age were men of immense wealth and power. You know the truth is quieter. It's walking home under a starlit sky with tired arms and a small pouch of gold dust tucked safely to your chest, already thinking about how you'll shape it into something meaningful when the sun rises again. Your feet carry you down the familiar narrow path to your compound, where the evening smells of millet porridge and grilled goat meat drift through the warm air. It's that perfect time when the sun has vanished, but the night isn't fully dark, the last light hovering like a secret that refuses to leave. Tonight, like most nights, your mind is still buzzing from the forge's heat and the day's delicate engravings. But here, at home, the rhythm shifts again. You've traded hammer and chisel for bowl and spoon, gold dust for grain dust, and the stakes feel pleasantly smaller, except maybe for the risk of burning your tongue on too hot stew. Your family greets you with easy warmth. Children scamper to tug at your sleeves, fingers still sticky from mangoes or baobab fruit. A cousin waves from near the small fire pit, turning skewers of meat that sizzle and spit fat into the flames. The smell alone feels like a promise of good things after a long day. Your wife, or in your case perhaps two wives, as is sometimes the custom in these parts, has already ladled out a steaming bowl of tow, the thick millet porridge that fills stomachs and hearts alike. You sink onto a woven mat, letting your tired legs stretch out, the aches of crouching over a bench slowly melting in the warmth of home. Food isn't just sustenance here. It's the day's closing ceremony. As you scoop a bit of porridge with your right hand, rolling it neatly before dipping it into a sauce rich with ground nuts and peppers, you catch yourself sighing in relief. The workshop's noise is replaced by soft conversations, laughter, and the occasional thump of a calabash gourd being set down. In this moment, you remember what all the day's labor is for. Not wealth, not fame, but this shared meal under a starry sky that seems impossibly big, yet comforting. Historians often paint grand pictures of Mali's golden age. Vast caravans crossing deserts, kings whose gold dust literally made the streets glitter, scholars debating philosophy in Timbuktu's libraries. And yes, those things are true in their own way. But here, in the glow of the cooking fire, you know that the real gold of this empire is this: the quiet, nightly miracle of everyone gathered safely, stomachs filled, voices weaving together like threads in a tapestry. It's not the kind of treasure that makes its way into royal ledgers, but it's richer all the same. After the meal, you lean back, belly pleasantly full, listening as elders tell stories of days long past. A griot visiting from another neighborhood drops by, his kora gently plucking out a melody older than the city itself. He sings of journeys across the Niger, of hunters turning into lions, of ancestors who tamed fire long before the first forge was built. Some tales you've heard 100 times, but they never grow old, especially when told under a sky peppered with stars that look like molten gold scattered far, far above. You think fleetingly of the pendant you carved today, the sunburst for the griot's necklace, and smile at the thought of him wearing it as he spins these same songs tomorrow night somewhere else. Children eventually nod off, heads against their mothers' laps, soft snores blending with the lull of music and distant night insects chirping. The evening air is thick but calm, the heat of day finally giving way to a soft breeze. You stretch your legs, toes curling in the cool sand, and realize you haven't thought about gold weight, merchant's demands, or flawless etchings for a whole hour. That in itself feels like a rare jewel. Yet even here, among family and friends, the craft follows you. Your eldest son fingers a tiny offcut of gold you slipped him earlier, eyes wide with curiosity. "Baba," he whispers, "will you teach me how to make the river patterns?" You ruffle his hair, thinking of your own father's rough hands guiding yours years ago. You tell him what your master once told you. Gold isn't tamed in a day. First, you learn patience, then you learn the rest. He nods solemnly, as if you've just handed him a secret key to a mysterious kingdom. Historians still debate whether artisanal families in Mali passed down skills strictly through bloodlines or shared them widely with apprentices and neighbors. You know that in truth, it's a bit of both. Skills are family heirlooms, yes, but they also spill over, carried by friendship, necessity, and the occasional stray apprentice who refuses to leave your doorstep. It feels right that something so precious is taught like a song, passed from one voice to another until everyone knows the tune. By the time the fire burns low, you're heavy-lidded and comfortably exhausted. The night hums with distant drums from a nearby celebration, and the air smells faintly of wood smoke and shea butter. You rise, thanking your hosts, though really they're kin more than hosts, and shuffle toward your sleeping quarters, the day's weight slipping from your shoulders with every step. Tomorrow will bring more gold, more fire, more meticulous care. But tonight, under the Malian stars, there's only the soft promise of sleep and the warmth of people who know exactly who you are, no matter how much gold passes through your hands. Night has fully settled over Mali now, and the compound rests in a kind of half-silence. You can still hear the faint tapping of a distant drum, a donkey braying somewhere down the road, and the soft laughter of neighbors saying their final goodnights. But here, inside your own hut, the world feels smaller, quieter, wrapped up in a blanket of warm darkness, and the familiar scent of woven mats and clay walls. You kick off your sandals, feeling the coolness of the packed earth beneath your feet, and finally let your body sink onto the mat where you'll sleep. This is your sanctuary, though luxury isn't the word anyone would use. The roof is thatched, the space is simple, but it feels like a little island in the bustling sea of Timbuktu's commerce and noise. A small clay oil lamp flickers in one corner, casting long shadows that sway like lazy dancers on the walls. You stretch out your arms and legs, every muscle singing its protest after the day's crouching, lifting, hammering, and walking. You've handled gold all day, but this soft mat, this safe corner of the city, this roof over your head, feels like the true wealth you work for. Before you even think about closing your eyes, there's one last ritual, one that every careful goldsmith knows by heart: counting and securing the gold dust. You reach into the hidden pouch sewn inside your clothing and pour its contents carefully onto a small leather square. Even by lamplight, the flecks glimmer faintly, as if holding on to the sun's last rays. Each grain tells a story of hours spent bent over a bench, of delicate etching and patient scraping, of fires hot enough to blister but controlled just enough to transform metal into beauty. You take a thin reed and nudge the dust into a tighter pile, humming under your breath, a habit you picked up long ago from your master. He used to say, "Gold listens better when you sing to it." Historians today still debate whether Malian smiths truly believed in metal spirits, or if it was just a poetic way of saying, "Don't mess this up." Either way, you keep the tradition alive. Once the gold is tucked safely into a small locked calabash gourd, hidden in a floor recess, you feel the day finally release its grip on your mind. You lie back on your mat, hands folded across your chest, and stare at the sliver of night sky visible through the open doorway. Stars are scattered like droplets of molten light, the same stars that guided caravans across deserts, the same stars you watched as a boy when you first dreamed of shaping gold into wonders. Sometimes you imagine what it would be like to travel with those caravans, to see beyond Mali, beyond the Niger's curve, to lands where people whisper about gold from your city like it's a legend. But dreams like that are for quiet moments, not the bright clamor of day. Your breathing slows, but your mind, as always, is reluctant to stop wandering. You think of tomorrow's tasks, the merchant who wants a bracelet shaped like a coiled snake, the trader's wife who asked for delicate leaf-shaped earrings, the apprentice who still can't manage a straight line with his chisel. It's endless, this river of requests and challenges, and yet you wouldn't trade it. To be a goldsmith here is to hold a kind of power, not the kind of power that commands armies or decides taxes, but the kind that shapes memory into metal, that gives weight and permanence to moments people don't want to forget. Outside, a warm breeze carries the faint, sweet scent of desert flowers. A gecko scuttles up the wall, pauses as if watching you, then disappears into the thatch. The little sounds of night, the creak of wood, the sigh of wind, the distant lullaby of a griot singing somewhere far away, blend together like threads of a soft blanket woven just for you. You smile to yourself, half amused at the thought that tomorrow you'll wake and do it all over again. Heat, hammer, polish, repeat. You might complain in the morning about stiff fingers and sore shoulders, but deep down, you know there's nowhere else you'd rather be. Some scholars argue that artisans like you in Mali were undervalued, overshadowed by the glory of kings and scholars. But lying here, drifting toward sleep, you know better. Your work touches people's lives quietly, but deeply, in ways royal decrees never can. A wedding ring, a finely etched amulet, a piece of gold handed down through generations. These are the true treasures of an empire. They may not make the headlines of history books, but they hum with meaning, just like the soft night sounds that cradle you now. Your eyelids grow heavier, your breath slower, your muscles melting into the mat. The day's worries have shrunk to the size of a single gold fleck, easy to hold, easy to set aside. And as you drift, you think of the forge's glow, tomorrow's fire waiting patiently for your hands, and the endless river of gold dust running through your life, each grain a promise that what you do matters, even in the quietest of ways. The first rays of dawn pull you gently from sleep, long before the city's full chorus awakens. You blink into the half-light spilling through the doorway, a soft amber glow that promises another day of work, trade, and heat. For a brief moment you stay still, feeling the earth beneath your mat cool from the night, listening to the quiet breath of your family around you. Somewhere outside, a rooster crows, its voice cracking in a way that makes you grin despite yourself. Even in Mali's golden age, some things, like overly ambitious roosters, are universal. Stretching, you rise slowly, your muscles stiff but willing. Before you even touch your tools or the forge, there's a whole ritual of washing, greeting, and preparing that feels like setting the stage for the day's performance. You step outside and head toward the communal washing area near a small well, the morning air surprisingly crisp before the sun truly claims the sky. Splashing cool water on your face feels like waking twice, once from sleep, once from dreams of gold that still cling to the edges of your mind. You run your fingers through your hair, shake off the droplets, and let the sun start warming your skin. Breakfast is quick but grounding. A bit of leftover millet porridge, reheated over last night's embers, a piece of dried fish if fortune smiles, or perhaps a handful of roasted ground nuts. The flavors are simple, comforting, and they fill you with just enough energy to face the coming hours. As you eat, you trade a few words with a neighbor, joking about who worked harder yesterday, who got scolded by their master, or who dropped gold dust and spent half the evening looking for it in the sand. You laugh together, because no matter how grand the empire grows, goldsmiths are bound by the same small struggles, the same quiet triumphs. Then comes the walk to the workshop. The city is slowly waking around you. Donkeys clopping over dusty roads, women balancing calabashes on their heads, merchants unfurling cloth to tempt early customers, children chasing each other through alleyways with wooden toys. The smell of fresh bread mingles with the dry tang of the desert wind, and for a moment you feel the pulse of Timbuktu, a place where worlds meet, where gold from the south, salt from the north, and stories from everywhere collide like dancers in a market square. Historians still argue whether Timbuktu's real wealth was its gold or its ideas, its scholars or its traders. Walking here, you suspect the truth is that it was both, humming together in the morning air. At the workshop, the day's first order of business is checking yesterday's work, seeing if the gold cooled just right, if the polish stayed true. You unwrap a small pendant shaped like a river fish, holding it to the light, pleased to see it gleam as intended. The merchant who ordered it wanted something to remind his wife of the Niger's life-giving waters, and you think she'll smile when she sees it. That's the thing about your craft. It's not just metal, it's meaning. Even on mornings when your fingers ache before you start, the thought of making something that carries a piece of someone's story keeps you moving. Today, though, there's a special challenge waiting. A visiting noble has requested a decorative dagger hilt, finely etched with symbols of strength and wisdom. It's work that demands patience beyond patience, steady hands and eyes that don't tire easily. You set everything else aside because a job like this can shape a reputation for years to come. As you heat the forge and lay out your chisels, you think about all the artisans before you, each one leaving invisible fingerprints on Molly's history. Names mostly forgotten, but skills echoed in every pattern passed down. The morning stretches on, time slipping like sand through fingers. Hammer taps blend with the low hum of the forge, a rhythm so familiar it feels like a heartbeat. A bird lands on the roof, singing a tune you half think you could engrave into gold if you only knew how. There's a calm here, a meditative quiet, even when apprentices are chattering or a trader stops by to check on an order. This is your space, your sanctuary of fire and metal, where the world shrinks down to gold dust, breath, and the promise of something beautiful taking shape. As the sun climbs, you pause for a moment, wiping sweat from your brow, and sip water from a clay jar. You think about how people centuries from now might imagine this time, this city, this life. Will they picture goldsmiths like you as mysterious alchemists, or just background figures in tales of kings and conquests? The truth, you know, lies somewhere in between. You're not royal, not famous, not the kind of person who makes the headlines of grand chronicles, but your work slips quietly into history, embedded in every ring, every pendant, every glint of gold that leaves this city on a caravan's back. You chuckle to yourself, imagining a scholar in the future writing about you and getting half the details wrong. Maybe they'll claim you worked miracles, melting gold with just a stare, or that you forged crowns for emperors, when in truth most days are spent making amulets for worried parents or bracelets for brides. But that's fine. You like being part of history's quieter stories, the kind that glimmer softly, waiting to be noticed by someone willing to look closer. The day rolls on, your tools singing, the forge breathing heat, and the world outside shifting toward midday. You know there's still much to do, but for now, you're lost in the craft, shaping gold into tomorrow's memory, while the city hums and history unfolds all around you. The sun arcs lazily toward the horizon, painting the city in gold and deep rose, as if even the sky wants to join in the empire's obsession with this precious metal. Your day in the workshop winds down, but only because your hands can't quite keep up with your ambitions anymore. Every joint feels stiff, every finger a little raw from the chisel. But the dagger hilt you've been etching is finally beginning to tell its story. A tale of lions, wisdom knots, and desert winds all frozen in shimmering lines. You blow a soft breath over its surface, watching dust motes dance in the evening light, and let yourself feel that quiet glow of pride that never really gets old. Closing the workshop is a ritual of its own. You carefully pack tools, cover the forge's coals with sand to let them sleep safely until dawn, and stow the precious workpieces out of sight. The apprentices scamper off first, eager for dinner and evening games, leaving you a moment of rare solitude. You lean against the doorway, letting the last warmth of the day settle on your skin, and watch the marketplace transition into its softer twilight self. Gone is the frenzied bargaining of morning. Now the air carries low voices, smells of roasting meat, and a kind of hush that seems to settle on everyone at once, like the city itself is exhaling after a long day. You gather your things, tucking a small pouch of gold dust under your sash. There's no safer place than with you, though you know if you drop it now, you'll be crawling in the dust like a desperate child before you dare to sleep. A gentle joke to yourself, but it's true. A goldsmith's fortune is fragile, a glittering line between comfort and hunger. Historians still debate whether artisans in Mali were truly wealthy or merely custodians of other people's treasure. Walking home, feeling the pouch light as a bird in your hand, you think it's a bit of both. Rich in skill and reputation, thin in coin, but heavy in pride. The streets are alive in a different way now. Torches flicker. Music drifts from a nearby square where griots gathered to tell stories under the stars, and the smell of sweet fried dough wafts temptingly through the air. Children dart past you, bare feet kicking up tiny whirlwinds of dust, while merchants who still have wares left make last-minute pitches to stragglers. A donkey cart squeaks by, loaded with bundles of cloth dyed in hues you'd swear were stolen from a sunset. Timbuktu at night feels like another world, softer yet somehow even richer than during the day, the air thick with promise and old stories. You pass a group of travelers just arrived with a caravan, their clothes dusty, faces lined from weeks on the road. They exchange news with locals of distant towns, unexpected sandstorms, rumors of war far to the north. You linger for a moment, curious, your mind already wandering to the paths these men have seen, the hidden markets where your own work might one day be sold, the strange coins and spices you'll probably never hold. There's a pang of longing there, but also gratitude. If everyone wandered, who would stay behind to forge memory into gold? Finally, you reach your compound. The familiar walls, the warm laughter of your family greeting you, the smell of cooking stew spilling from a clay pot. It's the kind of welcome that wraps itself around you like a soft blanket. You set aside the day's worries with your sandals at the door and step inside to share a simple meal. Millet thickened with broth, a few vegetables, maybe a sliver of dried meat. There's nothing fancy about it, but after hours of heat and hammering, it tastes like feasting at a king's table. You laugh with your loved ones, trade silly stories about neighbors and customers, and even tease yourself about that one time you nearly melted a pendant by daydreaming too close to the fire. They never let you live that down. After dinner, you sit outside for a while, letting the night breeze cool your skin. Stars blink awake above, scattered like spilled jewels, and you can't help but smile at the thought that no matter how much gold you work with, the sky will always outshine you. The moon hangs low and round, lighting up the rooftops and the winding paths between them. A neighbor's lute drifts through the air, each note rising and falling like waves on the Niger River. These are the hours when Mali feels eternal, as though time itself slows just to savor the evening. You think about tomorrow, about how you'll finish the dagger hilt, polish it until it glows like a captive sun, and hand it to the noble with a bow. Maybe he'll nod and move on, maybe he'll slip a few extra coins into your hand, or maybe he'll forget your face the moment he leaves. That part doesn't matter. What matters is that something you shape with your own tired fingers will outlast both of you, traveling through time and space long after you're dust. Perhaps centuries from now, someone will hold your work and wonder who you were, why you chose that pattern, what stories you wanted to tell. That thought fills you with a quiet, peculiar joy, like the warm hum of coals left glowing in the forge. The city winds down further, conversation softening, lamps flickering out one by one. You rise at last, step inside, and lay down for the night. The mat feels softer than you remember, or maybe it's just exhaustion wrapping you tight. As you drift toward sleep, you murmur a promise to tomorrow, another day of fire and dust, of gold and memory, of life humming softly beneath the desert stars. The night is heavy and warm when you stir awake, long before the first hint of dawn touches the horizon. A thin thread of moonlight slips through the doorway, painting silver stripes on the packed earth floor. You lie still for a moment, listening to the slow, even breaths of your family, the occasional shuffle of a goat outside, the distant murmur of the Niger's waters whispering in the darkness. Sleep pulls at you like a tide, but there's that peculiar stillness of the late night that feels like the world is holding its breath, waiting for you to notice it. Your thoughts drift, unspooling from the day before. The work you finished, the orders still waiting, the way the dagger hilt caught the last light of evening like it was hoarding the sun. You picture the forge, quiet now, tools resting where you left them, embers buried in sand, their warmth slowly ebbing into the earth. It's strange how the things that consume your every waking hour can seem so far away in this soft, stretched-out moment of night, almost like they belong to another life, another person entirely. A quiet laugh escapes you as you remember something trivial, a crooked pendant you made as an apprentice that everyone swore looked like a bent spoon. They teased you for weeks, yet someone bought it anyway, claimed it brought luck. Maybe it did. Funny how mistakes sometimes outlive perfection. Historians still argue whether every piece of gold work in Molly's golden age was deliberate artistry or a blend of brilliance and happy accidents. You know the truth leans toward the latter. Every craftsperson carries a few bent spoons in their past. The stars outside are brilliant tonight, sharper than usual, each one a pinprick promise in the dark. You imagine them as molten gold droplets flung across a vast black cloth, the kind of impossible jewelry only a god could wear. It makes you smile, thinking that no matter how skilled your hands become, the universe will always be the true master goldsmith. A light joke maybe, but you believe it more than you admit. Gradually your body softens, surrendering to the rhythm of the night. The air feels cooler now, the hum of distant crickets steadier, wrapping you in a kind of lullaby older than any song humans ever wrote. You roll onto your side, feeling the familiar weight of the day's fatigue sink deep into your bones. Tomorrow will come soon enough. The shuffling of traders, the fire of the forge, the dance of hammer and gold dusk. But right now, there is nothing to do but rest. You close your eyes, breathing slow and even, each exhale a little longer than the last. Images blur, the workshop, the bustling market, the glint of a finished pendant, the faces of strangers whose lives you'll touch with your craft, even if you never meet them. It's all fading now, soft edges dissolving, like gold melting smoothly into its mold, reshaping into dreams. And so you drift, not with the clamor of history's grand battles or kings, but with the quiet, steady heartbeat of a goldsmith's life in a city of dust and light. You are part of something vast yet gentle, a story whispered across time, its shine never truly fading. Sleep takes you slowly, kindly, as if the whole world is tucking you in under its vast, starlit blanket. And now, as the last embers of this story cool, you feel yourself floating in its calm, lingering warmth. The city of Timbuktu grows quieter still, its narrow alleys hushed, torches flickering low, the Niger's distant song flowing soft and endless. Somewhere, a lone lute strums a slow, drowsy tune, each note stretching like a sigh across the night air. The forge is dark, the tools at rest, and all the weight of the day's labor has slipped from your hands, leaving them light as feathers. Your mind drifts back to the shapes you traced in gold, the patterns that told stories of rivers, winds, and forgotten legends. They're safe now, waiting for the sun to rise again, waiting for you to breathe life into new pieces tomorrow. There's no rush here, no sharp edges, just time flowing like honey, thick and sweet, carrying you gently towards sleep. The night sky above Molly glitters softly, endless and patient. Each star feels like a tiny promise, a quiet reminder that history is made not only by kings and empires, but by hands like yours, shaping small treasures that last longer than a lifetime. The thought settles warm and steady in your chest, easing every muscle, every stubborn thread of wakefulness. Let the stillness deepen now. Let your breath match the slow rhythm of the desert breeze. Feel the mat beneath you soften, the world tilting toward dreams. You are safe. You are enough. And you are part of a story that will glimmer forever in the memory of time. Sleep well, traveler of history, dreamer of golden ages. The night holds you kindly, and the dawn will wait as long as you need.